and welcome to a rather special edition of the Game Buzz. Normally, we would have held off our recording until Friday, and we'll still be doing one tomorrow for the Saturday slot. But some news emerged in the early hours of the morning last night of Microsoft doing a complete 180, so it would seem, on the Xbox One. Basically, Microsoft have U-turned regarding their internet connection requirements, so you won't have to connect 24 hours, every 24 hours now, and you'll be able to trade in, lend, resell, gift, and rent disc-based games, just like we can today on the Xbox 360. So Carl joins me today.
Hello.
That came out of left field.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I didn't actually pay attention to it last night. I've caught up on it all this morning. And yeah, I mean, in some ways it was kind of expected that they had to react to it, because up until now they hadn't really done anything. It was just a case of, it almost seemed like arrogance in a way to how they were dealing with everything that came from all of the E3 announcements. But yeah, it's definitely a victory for the consumer and a victory for the internet. Huzzah!
Huzzah!
But at the same time, I can't help but feel some level of disappointment about it all.
Well, let's break that down for a minute. First of all, consumer rights have been respected.
Yes.
Let's look at the positives from it, because there was a massive backlash to this, like an enormous backlash to this.
Yeah.
Xbox, go home. You're drunk. Which was a meme that was flying around after that Microsoft reveal.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's been a lot of anger, a lot of justified anger about this, I feel, because consumers are naturally worried about this sort of thing. And just because, and the thing is, the comparisons to Steam, people forget that PCs aren't actually Steam boxes, that there are many, many, many places you can go to get games that are, in fact, DRM free, that don't require online accounts or anything like that. And that's kind of what people felt was being taken away, that sort of choice.
Yeah.
And also that sort of trust as well, because it seems quite a draconian requirement. And the thing is, Microsoft never really played up the positives in the beginning.
Yeah, they said they were there, but then didn't really go into that much detail about them.
No, which was just a terrible tactic, because you want people to be like, "Oh my god, that's awesome," rather than "What are you doing with my rights?"
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, it's going to be interesting that they've said that digital games will still not to be able to be resold or traded back in, considering there's been a whole bunch of faff made about that in European courts at the moment. Whether that will stay the same as well will be interesting. But yeah, it is good in the fact that, you know, they have given the choice back, because that was one of the main things that I praised Sony for. It gave the consumer choice by allowing them to have used games, being able to swap discs, everything else. And yeah, they've basically, as we've said, reverted back to what the current generation do in terms of discs, and in a lot of ways that is fantastic news. You know, I can give you, like, I can play on The Last of Us, I can give it to John, he can play on it now, and then give it to me back when he's done, although I wouldn't do that because it's a great game and I want it. But yeah, I in that respect, brilliant news. And it obviously shows that it shows they were paying attention. Whether they were paying attention to the consumer backlash or whether they were just looking at the pre-orders for the PS4 and going, we want a bit of that, we want those numbers, remains to be seen, and will probably be debated to death. But
that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's like, did Microsoft really listen to? Well, not really. I mean, that's relatively unlikely.
Yeah.
They were watching that Sony press conference very carefully. You know they were, and Sony really took it to them. I think perhaps if Sony had stepped more in line with sort of looking ahead, perhaps they might have followed not necessarily the same sort of path, but the digital future is our future. We will be playing without discs at some point. In the near future. There will be discless systems up ahead. And it was interesting to see. Yeah, Sony really went after Microsoft in that press conference. Like they didn't even try to hide it.
No, no,
It
no.
was so Microsoft would have definitely been watching that. But also, it's interesting. This morning, a number of reports coming in with positive statements from the likes of GameStop and GameFly. Very, very happy. And Polygon's reported GameFly's SVP of Business Development and Content saying, I always felt good about the future of GameFly, but I feel better today. Today is win-win for consumers as well as GameFly. I think choice is always important, and now consumers have more choice. And I give Microsoft credit for listening to their consumers. But also, I imagine there would have been conversations with retailers, GameStop especially at E3, and they would not have been happy with these controversial policies. I mean, GameStop would have definitely been one of those sort of hand-picked retailers by Microsoft with ridiculous systems to ensure game transfers could be performed surgically. I don't really know. It's like extracting someone's soul and transferring it into another body.
Pretty much,
I don't know.
yes.
But yeah, the retailers have got to be very happy about that, and that just it kind of shows just how much sway they still have in this industry for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the UK, I mean, the main retailer that would have been affected was Game, really.
Yeah. Well, there was always that they were opening an Xbox there. Well, they will be opening an Xbox store in London.
Yes.
Will
that go ahead now? Because clearly that was almost certainly based at, or aimed at, the whole DRM sort of like go in and trade sort of thing. You would have thought.
Yeah.
Whether that will still happen or not, I don't know. I mean, if it does, then it goes to show that Microsoft's probably just thrown a whole bunch of money at them and said, look at us. But yeah, it's one of those things we're going to have to see. I mean, at the same time, I saw a comment while I was getting up to speed this morning, actually praising the fact that Microsoft did actually turn around rather quickly when you consider the size of the company themselves. For them to turn around and do something to just completely do a 180 is really impressive in a way. But at the same time, I think we should actually get onto the negatives now. It is disappointing in the fact that they haven't stuck to their guns. And the nearest comparisons I can come up with is the Mass Effect ending, like the Mass Effect 3 story ending. It's almost like they haven't stuck to their artistic integrity in a way and said, this is what we envisioned for the future. This is what it is. And that's what they've been saying. They've been going, this is what we want for you. This is what we've been planning from the start. They even turned around and said that they'd built the system up from the ground up around this DRM and that they couldn't flick a switch to turn it off. And now they've just flicked the switch.
There is that. It kind of reminds me of SimCity a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, because this is the thing. As much as there have been people praising Microsoft for doing a 180, for being pro-consumer and giving choice back to gamers in ways that we understand.
Yeah.
There's also been some disappointment about that the 10-person sharing plan.
Yeah, the friends and family thing. Yes.
Exactly. That you could nominate 10 mates who'd be able to see your game library at all times and just borrow games over the cloud.
Yeah.
Virtually without having to give them a disc. Which was a great idea, incredibly poorly explained, like crippling, actually cripplingly poorly explained. And the thing is, like, as much as Microsoft have, as much as consumers and retailers and Sony might have influenced this decision, a lot of blame has to lie with Microsoft for failing to explain, frankly, rather good ideas in any kind of coherent, simple fashion. Because this is the thing, now that people are reflecting on it, because we've lost it, although who knows, Microsoft could turn around again and find a middle ground, which would be lovely.
Absolutely.
But now people are reflecting on it. They're reflecting on what it is that they never had but kind of lost. And that sort of virtual sharing, and we're starting to see people actually now, bizarrely, now that this U-turn has happened, realize perhaps what Microsoft was going for in the first place. Now, that doesn't necessarily change the opinions of some, and indeed, like it's great that we have this choice and this ownership back. But you're
Yeah.
right. There are downsides to this, and yeah, you have to wonder about the longevity of this decision, and whether or not, like, I imagine this might change again, sort of in the near future, and I kind of hope it does, because like one of the things I thought was, does it really have to be this all or nothing?
Yeah. It is interesting because I was trying to think of like a halfway that you could go with it all, and it's very difficult. I feel to actually come up with something, and and like you say, it is disappointing in the fact that they've changed this vision for what they wanted to do and everything else, but it's really weird. I do feel a lot better about it all. Like I now feel more inclined to consider getting an Xbox One for like eventually down the line or for launch. But I'm still not convinced whether I will yet. That's the thing. Like I mean, you look at the fact that, like, as I previously said, they said that they built this system around the DRM systems, and it's almost as if like either they've got to rebuild the system from scratch, which is basically what they said they did to get it all to work, or they were lying to us from the beginning. And I'm feeling, well, why should I necessarily trust them to not put it back in, just flip the switch the other way again, and it's all there, and the systems are all there. I don't know necessarily whether I'm in a position where I can say that I fully trust myself to go back and consider it yet. And I think that's down to something that you have also just said, and that's the poor communication. It's something that's been across the industry for absolutely months. Poor communication, trying to let the consumer know what's going on with absolutely everything, and it's again affecting Microsoft. And I am still waiting for everything to be clarified, whether this is definitely something that they will not go back to, or whether it is. Still a lot to discuss, really, even though that they've come out and said this, and like I say, many people have championed it. I'm still waiting to hear a bit more, really.
I agree, and I think like it's a real shame because in a way, we've basically gone from sort of two sort of binaries. Well, yeah, two sort of ends of the spectrum. So the status quo and Microsoft's forward thinking, if rather restrictive, well, essentially digital rights management. But I don't really understand, and again, this comes down to communication, why we can't necessarily have both.
Yeah.
Because kind of the U-turn undoes most of the bad stuff about the forward-thinking system.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why if you kept discs, why you couldn't have the best of both worlds. Why having discs and making them allowable to be traded really impacts the sharing potential for digital software. And the thing is, like, I don't, because in that world, everybody wins. You're incentivized to purchase digital because you can share much more easily.
Yeah.
You're incentivized. It would be interesting to see if Microsoft were competitive in their pricing and third parties were competitive in their digital pricing, which has been something that we just really haven't seen on consoles this generation. If that would sort of push people more towards the digital. The fact that Xbox Live Gold is being upgraded to some sort of PlayStation Plus service would again mean that you'd have lots of players with only digital offerings on that sort of bizarre instant game collection light thingy that Microsoft have got going on.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand why it's not possible to have the best of both worlds. And for that question, I think that's where the retailers come in.
Yeah.
That's where GameStop's influence comes in. Because as much as we'd like to think this is all about the consumers, I actually think this is probably more about the high street. Or the online high street.
Yeah, it's a good point, the fact that, why they can't have both systems. Because, like you say, it means that the usual sort of like disc-based second-hand market can still exist, but you'd still have that upper tier sort of like digital cloud based tier almost. I mean, I still reckon that people won't use it necessarily that much simply because it would be too expensive in the long run. But yeah, it's an interesting point actually.
I think it also ties into because one of the arguments amongst the disappointed crowd this morning was that we should lament this because it would have meant games getting cheaper. We've seen it on Steam. Steam actually started out as a very expensive service.
It still is at times.
And it still is at times, but that's sort of metered out by those ridiculous sales, some healthy price cuts, and good service. But Microsoft never indicated anything like that. And moreover, you feel that actually Microsoft, Sony, the large publishers, they could solve the used games problems right now by making that digital marketplace competitive right now, but they won't because retailers. Because GameStop. And I can't help but feel that that's what's behind this. I do think that there's if anything, this is vindication for people who do speak out online and do speak out on social media, who do lambast publishers and platform holders, and that should never stop. Never ever stop doing that, because you have a voice, use it. And this backlash went far beyond the usual sort of vocal minority, as we call it. Like, big news outlets picked this up. The first site to break this news, the news on this U-turn, was What Hi-Fi. We've gone beyond that sort of small niche vocal community that sort of responds to everything. This is much bigger than, as you mentioned earlier, Mass Effect 3's ending. Like, this has gone beyond the usual sort of core boundaries.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I can't help but feel that it's the retailers that have really had a hand in this one. And Sony basically leaving the door open for them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was absolutely the reaction to Sony. So, I mean, while I think about it, there is one other thing that has concerned me from this. They've said that you are going to be able to play games offline.
Mm-hmm.
There will be no 24-hour connection that you won't need to be on every 24 hours to let the Xbox know that you're still alive. Well, the servers anyway. And this brings me to the cloud computing stuff. If people are going to be able to play their games offline, then surely the cloud computing side of it all is going to have to be optional. Surely. And then that kind of like throws a complete spanner in the works in kind of like integrating it into everything moving forward. Or they're going to have it so that certain games do force you to go online. So it's really weird how that's going to actually play out in a way. Now that we know that you definitely will be able to play offline for weeks at a time if you really want to.
Agreed. But the I think one of the things about this all is just how little we still know.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. We still don't know enough, and it's great that they've announced this. As we said, more choice. Great, we love choice, but still so much we need to learn, and it's the time is kind of running out in a way, because they've got to finalize everything. They've got to make sure that the OS is now working to the specifics of this new decision, and yeah, time is running out. They need to let people know now. We know exactly what is going on with the PlayStation 4, and yet we still really don't know what's going on with the Xbox One.
Exactly, and I think we have to find out what has happened to Microsoft's Grand Division now. What this means for will there now be enormous updates? I kind of assume in a way that you'll still be able to buy into an always connected service with Xbox Live on Xbox One.
Yeah.
Similar to the way we have it now. Microsoft have actually been very, very good at having background downloads, sort of making sure that even on Xbox 360, you're not hugely inconvenienced as long as you do have a connection to the internet, like that really works in your favor. And I'd assume that just because this 180 has happened in terms of sort of that low end, the high end will still be fairly good. We don't know how good. We don't know how many options. We don't know what those options are. We just know that these two binaries reverted to the first one.
Yeah. I will make a point that also this is almost certainly from sort of like a skin deep sort of perspective, it's leveled the playing field.
It has.
You know, the PS4 and Xbox One will now have the same sort of used game policy, which means that the PS4's major draw, its major marketing campaign that it went out and did straight after its E3 conference, is gone. It's great that we now have that option across both consoles, but that's leveled the playing field now. So now it's going to be a focus on the sort of like online services, like you say, the instant game collection choices. It's going to be, you know, which like service is better in terms of social connectivity and everything else. So it means that we're now going to be paying a lot more attention to both sides in those aspects, and that kind of excites me as a way, because it means they're going to really push out what their service can really bring in a unique sense to the consumer.
I agree. And not only that, we're going to now have, with this level of playing field, we will now have a renewed focus on the games, which means Gamescom is going to be a lot of fun indeed. Because suddenly now those exclusives are the only things that separate them, really.
Yeah.
And those and how the services are deployed. So it's very exciting. And the thing is, yeah, as a gamer, like there have been a lot of people sort of sticking to one side, and we shouldn't really, like, this isn't a let's all welcome Microsoft with a sort of open arms now that they've given us our rights back.
Yeah.
But it is, the thing is, it does change things. I don't see how it couldn't, because yeah, they're both offering the same sort of systems in this regard, and thus it's going to come down to which games and services float your boat the most. And that's brilliant from a consumer perspective. And this is why competition is wonderful for the industry. This is why a single console future would be a bad thing. Because we need this. We need platform holders pushing one another harder on relationships with consumers, on the services they offer and the games they provide. That's what we need. And I think this is a product of that, absolutely. And it's capitalism. What a wonderful thing.
Yay, capitalism.
Yay! Competitive capitalist markets.
Woo!
That's a really strange note to end on.
It probably is.
Games. One other thing. You're going to need a better... Okay, with this in mind, you're going to need a better exclusive than fucking Rise, Microsoft.
Yes, for God's sakes. Come on.
Come on. But yes, thank you very much for listening, guys. We will catch you at the weekend for... a more general game buzz on the news of this week, but we'll almost certainly touch on this because, God knows, Microsoft might do another U-turn in a couple of hours. Who knows? Like, when will this news calm down?
Yay for E3 and the madness it brings.
Oh, God, and it certainly ain't over yet. This year is going to be very interesting indeed. We're only just getting started. Thank you very much for listening, guys. We'll catch you at the weekend. Let us know your thoughts on the situation in the comments box below. Until next time, bye.